Hello everybody, Ben Woodruff here, and in today's video, this video is going to be a little bit of a teaser. I'm going to be talking about Chetro Kettle, which is a Chacoan Great house in Chaco Canyon, New Mexico, but I'm going to specifically be talking about a Mesoamerican structure, an architectural structure that most people who visit Chaco Canyon are totally unaware of, and it's exciting. It's really fascinating. So first, just a little bit of groundwork. Chaco Canyon is a community in, well, it's not a community, it's a huge canyon in New Mexico, and there's many great houses. Then these great house communities, Pueblo Bonito is the most famous one. It's the most intact. That's the one you always see. It's the most iconic. But these people who live here, there's these great houses at hundreds of rooms, and these people had strong influence from Mesoamerica. Now, we know that there were people living in this canyon originally, but after the fall of the Toltecs, there was a lot of migration, a lot of mass change, and we know that there was a lot of classes of people who made their way up north. There were already trade routes in existence, and they made their way up north and kind of made Chaco Canyon their home. And it seems kind of made a new way of life, a very good and a very bad one. They did great things, they did terrible things. I'm not going to get into all that in this video. But the interesting thing is, because they had this influence from Mesoamerica, you know, from Mexico, Guatemala, from, you know, the Mayan Empire, and the, you know, the Toltecs and all this, then that way of thinking and a lot of those goods came up. So we know at Chaco Canyon, live macaws were brought up from the south. We know that copper bells, which are actually very hard to make back then, were brought up from there. A lot of new religious ideas were brought up, and also cacao beans, which were very sacred. And in Chaco Canyon, there were these mugs, these special mugs, and we've tested them, and there is theobromine residue within them. So we know that in these Chacoan mugs that they were drinking cacao. You know, cacao beans were very valuable everywhere that they were found, from Mesoamerica all the way to the southwestern current United States. So within this way of thinking, we know that a lot of this was happening at Chaco Canyon. The idea of like, hey, we want to be we want to regain some of the greatness of what we had further down south. And when you look at most of these structures, at first glance, if you're walking through these rooms and these halls and all these great houses, they just look like pueblos, but on a massive scale. You know, adobe structures with you know, beautiful stone masonry. It just seems like, okay, these are just little pueblo, but giant, and that's what it seems like. It doesn't seem visually very Mesoamerican, but at Chetro Kettle, there's something very different. Now, if we zoom in from Google Earth on Chetro Kettle, and we zoom in and take a look at it here, Chetro Kettle, it's not very well excavated. So only a fraction of it has been excavated. And again, I'm going to Chaco Canyon in November, and I've been there many times, but I'm going with a great film crew, and we're really going to do due diligence to really document all this. So you're going to have a big in-depth video just on Chetro Kettle. But I just wanted to point this out because I have some clips from when I was there last time. And when you see Chetro Kettle itself, you know, it's a big Chacoan Great house, and it's right next door to Pueblo Bonito, which is an even bigger great house, and it's equally right next door to Pueblo de Arroyo and several other great houses in this area. But what makes this one unique is this is the only instance anywhere in the United States where we have a colonnade, an actual colonnade, a Mesoamerican colonnade. So what is a colonnade? Well, let's take a look at this. When we take a look at the earliest colonnades we see in Mesoamerica are at Teotihuacan. Now, Teotihuacan, it's kind of where all great, you know, Mesoamerican cultures wanted to kind of trace their heritage to, even if it's not a literal heritage, just their ideas, even that. This is a site where we have the enormous Temple of the Sun and the Temple of the Moon, very iconic, very famous. A lot of times people mistakenly think that the Aztecs, that this is the Aztecs. It's not. This is well before the Aztecs. And the Aztecs actually later on stumbled across these ruins and were like, whoa, you know, what's this? What's this greatness? So we know at Teotihuacan, big, powerful place, it falls, and in the aftermath of it, you have the formation and uprising of the Toltecs. And at Tula, you know, Tula is a very famous Toltec site. that a lot of people go and visit. And when that collapsed in that aftermath, a lot of that population is part of who came up and became Chaco Canyon. Well, let's look back at these people. At Teotihuacan, we have colonnades. Now, we don't think much of a colonnade in today's world. It doesn't seem very hard for us to make something like that with today's modern building techniques and modern machinery. But back then, having a big colonnade like that, it was needless, it was decadent, it was opulent, and it was a way to show off power and authority and wealth. And again, the first colonnades we see are at Teotihuacan. They're very beautiful. Now, there's many more that are no longer standing, but there are some that are standing, and we can see this was a very beautiful idea and a very bold idea. And some of the paint is still on some of these because these would have originally been painted bright red. Now, the Toltecs at Tula also have colonnades. And again, all the roofing structures are gone. They're disintegrated, they're fallen, and all we have left is some of these columns left of the colonnade. But we can clearly see these colonnade designs and see what they were going for. And we also see this at Palenque. Palenque in Central America is a Mayan city, and we have a colonnade there. When I get into Chetro Kettle, I'll go into more detail of what else may have come up. But we know that macaws were coming up for the Palenque region, and also Palenque has T-doors. And the first instance we have of T-doors in the American Southwest is at Chaco Canyon. It's the first time we see it. So is it possible that that idea of the T-aperture came up from Palenque? It's possible. It's a point worth arguing, but we don't know that for sure. But my point is not the T-doors, but the colonnade. Because at Chetro Kettle, there is a colonnade. Now, Chetro Kettle started construction around 990 AD, and it was basically completed by about 1075 AD. It was kind of a work in progress. It was built more and more and more. And when you go into this place now, all the outer wall it's kind of like fallen down on itself and hasn't been excavated. The site, early 1900s it was excavated, and we don't. So when you go there, you walk in and you seem like you're walking towards the ruins. It's like, no, you're already in the Great House. You've gone over and through. You're just walking over walls. You don't realize they just haven't been rebuilt. Well, so by 1075 AD, it was kind of when the main set of construction stopped. But this site was remodeled anciently in the mid 1100s, 1100 AD. And that's very interesting because the remodeling that happened shows a counterculture. I'll get to that in a second. Now, most people had left Chaco Canyon by the 1140s. There was a big, massive drought going on for decades and decades, and it was uninhabitable when they left. And by 1250 AD, Chetro Kettle had been vacated. So that mid-1100s, so Chetro Kettle was a proper great house doing all kinds of crazy things. And then it gets remodeled. Well, we know that there was a lot, we talking to the tribes around today, and the descendants of people from Chaco and the descendants of people who were afflicted by bad things that Chaco was doing, including enslaving people, cannibalism, things like this that we have both oral histories as well as the archaeological proof of. We know some bad stuff was happening in Chaco, and we know a lot of these ideas had come up from Mexico, from like the post-Toltec migration. And so what we see is at Chetro Kettle, we see a colonnade. And this colonnade has been filled in. It's very unusual. Why would you do that? So again, the colonnade was there to try to say, look, we are, Mesoamerican, royalty, basically. We are a big deal. We are important. Look at this. And when you first walk into the Great House, you look across, and what do you see? You see this colonnade. It's like a big red flag saying, look at me, I'm Mesoamerican royalty, just like down in Palenque, just like down in Tulu, all these places. It's an advertisement. And then when the community remodels in the mid-1100s, they fill them in and just make it into a wall. It's almost like you're trying to hide the past. We see that where, you think about some of what happened in Germany during World War II, and a lot of those monuments and stuff that were like, aha, and then after the fact, it's like, oh, now Germany's pulled back from that. It's like, we acknowledge that history, we don't want to talk about that, and we want to remove these monuments and not kind of acknowledge that they were here because it's a dark blemish on our history. That's kind of what I see here, is that this colonnade was a great thing for a while, and then when there was sort of an uprising and people were like, we're done with this, we're done with the dark things that you guys are doing, then it's like, okay, well, we're going to fill in this. Whether the people living at Chetro Kettle did it or the community outside. Because again, in all of this canyon, there's a wealthy class and a commoner class. There's definitely a class division. And we know from the oral histories of the people in the area that there was some sort of an uprising at some point, and the stories go from that there was, they kind of sum it up, there was a great gambler who had come up from Mexico, and that he helped make all these great things and brought in all this great trade, and then when the people were like, no, we're done with this, some say that they cut off his head and buried him outside one of the great houses. Another version from one of the tribes today says that they put him in an arrow and shot him back to Mexico. So either way, no matter what, obviously this is an oversimplified version, it gets passed down, but the idea was people came up from Central America and Mexico and intermingled with people who were already here, and then made a separate class system, and were trying in their own way to make their own culture, but also kind of replicate the grandeur and greatness of the Mayan and the Toltec and the Teotihuacanos. And then eventually, both just because of social pressure as well as the great drought that was going on, people were like, dude, enough is enough, we've had it, we're done with this. So this colonnade is wild, because if you don't know about it, you just think it's a wall, but it's actually a Mesoamerican style colonnade that then in the mid 1100s was filled in to try to, oh no, we kind of want to get away from this bit of history that we had here. So it's a fascinating thing. I will go into way more depth about this subject. Again, upcoming in November, I'm going to be visiting Chaco Canyon again with a great team, and we're going to do a very in-depth video on all the great houses there and all the sites. We'll go far into more depth. But as I'm going through what video footage I have from my previous trips there, it's like, oh, I do have some interesting little clips here. And this site, yeah, I don't want to go into it because there's so much about this place. It's so exciting. So anyways, I hope you enjoyed learning a little bit about the colonnade at Chetro Kettle in Chaco Canyon, New Mexico. If you haven't already, if you could hit subscribe, I very much appreciate it. It helps me keep this channel up and going. And always remember that life is a gift. So never stop learning and never stop exploring. We'll see you next time.